Welcome back to The Person That Everyone Needs. I'm your host, Webb Hoggard, and at the beginning of this podcast, I just want to take a quick moment to give a shout out to a good friend of mine. Craig Good is turning 40 this very week, and the reason I want to shout out Craig is because he is a person that I've needed. This podcast was a dream of mine. It's been a part of my heart for many years. And I've been intimidated about the medium to which to get this information out. And Craig inspired me. He encouraged me. And then he has taken all of this content, and he's been the one who actually populates the podcast. And he's helped me out so much with this. And if it wasn't for him, this thing wouldn't even exist. And so you may not know Craig yourself, and that's completely okay. I want to give a shout out to someone who was taking the time to serve me, to help me. And I hope that in his service of me, that maybe this content has helped you somehow. Maybe that's just an inspiration for you today to think about how you could be a Craig for someone else. The person that everyone needs is someone who is helpful. And I just want to shout out to Craig. He's been a good friend of mine for several years, and I'm proud of him and grateful for him, and he has helped me out in many, many ways. In fact, he was probably the first adult to have to hear all of this content, and he's heard it multiple times now. So I'm just very grateful for his willingness to listen, his willingness to help, his willingness to serve, and now his willingness to help me publish these thoughts. Now, as we are going to shift gears again, we talked about leadership for a few weeks there, and during this season, I have had it on my heart to discuss something that's very important to me, but I don't know that anyone would ever think that I know enough to tell anybody else how to live this way. So I'm just going to tell you, as a person who is now 9 years into parenting, I want to talk about, for the next several weeks, parenting the person that everyone needs. My 3 boys are blessed gifts from God, and they are so different. They're each boy. I don't have any girls. I just have 3 sons. They are so different. They are so funny. They are so fun. There's just so many so's to go along with them. The personalities are so different. Luke is a very conscientious and kind, emotional young man. He's my 9-year-old who is already sensitive to the Holy Spirit and has been having connections with God at a beautiful level. And he's brilliant. He's a smart kid. He's always thinking on a deeper level than even I am sometimes. And he's always consistently thinking about how to help others. And that's a person that everyone needs. My middle child, Jude, also has my heart. He's my lion. He's the Lion of Judah to me. He is loud. He is rambunctious. He's clumsy, but he never gets hurt. He doesn't cry long. He doesn't care about himself, but he will melt in a puddle of tears if he feels like someone else is hurt or bothered. He cares about other people deeply. He loves other people deeply, except for his younger brother. That's a joke, because he actually cares about him very much too. But as far as tormenting goes, no one torments Graham as much as Jude does, and vice versa. Now, Graham, on the other hand, he's very emotionally intelligent as well, but he is also cunning. Personalities change from time to time, but it seems like right now he's going to be the one that's always looking at me side-eyed, trying to get away with as much as he possibly can, which from what I understand, is exactly what the baby is supposed to do. But Graham is very physically sensitive. Jude can fall down steps and get up laughing. Graham, he plays with his dinosaurs and gets his finger caught in the knee of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and all of a sudden he's melting, he's screaming. And it's so much to the point that if Jude cries, me and Amanda run. But if Graham does, we kind of wait, because he cries over everything. That doesn't mean he's just a crybaby. It's just he's usually looking for attention, and we don't want to give him what it is that he wants in those moments. I explained their personalities just a little bit to tell you that I don't have a bunch of years of experience, but the years of experience I have is pretty varied, and I do help a lot of other parents as they discuss the issues that they have with their children. I have been studying the idea of parenting for well over a decade, probably closer to 2 decades. I was dreaming about being a dad. I didn't dream about being married nearly as much as I dreamed about being a dad one day when I was a child. And so it's been a part of my heart my whole life. And so today, maybe you're listening and you're like, well, I don't have any kids. I'm not married. I'm not even looking to that. Or maybe you're saying, well, I've already gone through that time in my life. Well, let me point something out to you before you turn this thing off. Preparation is the attitude of life. So if you have not ever parented yet, I encourage you to listen, because you're planning, you're preparing for the day that you will. And you need to begin to dream toward those things. The second thing is, maybe you're beyond that season and you look back. Well, maybe something that we talk about over the next few weeks, maybe you'll know. I heard somebody say one time, you didn't help me at all, but at least you told me what I died from. I don't know. Maybe sometimes hearing some thoughts of what we could have done better is helpful to us in helping us in our personal understanding of ourselves, but also it might help us to lead other parents into the direction that they need to go. And that would help you become the person that everyone needs, because you have some tools in the box to help some other parents in your life. Maybe you want to help the next generation. Maybe you weren't for your kids what you wish you'd have been, and you could help them to be for your grandchildren. Or maybe you've never had kids at all and you're in that age where you know that it won't ever happen, but you want to have impact on others and influence on others. You can also be a spiritual parent. So my encouragement to you is to listen to something before it applies to you, or maybe even after, and maybe give me some feedback if I'm off base. I would love to hear from some of you that this is either helpful or that you would like to hear some different angles on what we're talking about. My encouragement is, don't turn it off for the next several weeks just because maybe you don't feel like it includes you. Now, as we change this, I want to give you some thoughts on parenting before we actually get to a teaching. First of all, your job as a parent is not to get them to obey you. It's to get them to obey God. Obedience is most beautiful through love, not fear. Your job is not to get them to fear you. Your job is to get them to respect you, honor you, love you, consider you. Now, there is an element of fear there, but you don't want intimidation to be the only relationship, the only tool in the box. You want to be a person that they want to please because they love to see you be pleased. In fact, I wanted to tell you today that if you have children, the highest level of fulfillment in your life will create the greatest amount of happiness in theirs. When children are polled on what they want the most, they almost always say that they wish they had parents that were happy. Parents that were happy. Now, that's not what we think about often. We want to give them a life we never have. We want to give them the things we didn't have, or give them the things that we did have. And we want to spend all the time trying to figure out vacations and how to do greater things. And I just tell you, your kids, they want you to feel fulfilled. The greatest gift that you could give to them is a feeling of fulfillment. The second greatest gift you can give them is a strong marriage. Keep your marriage your priority. Do not allow your children to enter into that place of higher importance than your spouse. Number one, that spouse is going to be there past those children, or at least they should be. And number two, those kids will feel much more safe if they know that mommy and daddy are in the house together forever for the rest of their life. The third thing is, make sure your priorities are right. God first, spouse second, children third, and then job fourth. We'll talk about this more in another podcast, but one of the major things you need to help your kids understand is that nothing in this world will ever be more important than they are, other than God and your spouse. Another thing that has been helpful for me is in trying to decide whether to indulge my children or to constantly help them understand that in this world there's going to be a lot of no's. I'm trying to teach them to share. I'm trying to teach them to be kind and to be generous. And so how can I teach them that if I'm also the person primarily in their life that has to say no to them? And I have to remind myself, this has just been helpful for me. I don't know and I can unpack it further maybe another day, but I have lived this life not just with my kids, but everywhere. I am your servant, but you are not my master. I serve others because God told me to. I am your servant, but you are not my master. You don't get to tell me how to serve you. And so my kids, they'll say things to me like, well, obviously you don't love me. You're not buying me everything. I had that from time to time. Well, I hear what you're saying there, but I am going to serve you when I can, but I'm not going to do everything you ask just because you asked it, because you're not my master. In parenting, we have to make sure that we are constantly staying the leader in the family. This is a really hard thing in a culture that is so overindulgent with their children and so constantly trying to get their favor and make them want to like us and all that. Listen, your children should often feel like you are parent before being friend until later on in their life. And again, that's another thing we'll talk about at greater length. Here's the last thing before I let you go today. God has granted you children to steward, not rule. They are completely human already, deserving honor because they are in God's image. We don't get to talk down to children. We do not get to demean them or make them feel small or to intimidate them or manipulate them. We do not get to treat them as lower than human just because their fullness of understanding is not at the level that we have. We must treat these children as images of God in full standing as heirs to the same throne of Christ as we have. If we mistreat people because their understanding is not at the higher level or at the same level as our own, that is called sin. I mean, just right down to it, it's called sin. We are not allowed to mistreat people specifically based on the level of their understanding. We must treat them as children of God. And so your own kids fit that as well. Do whatever you can to take care of them and help them. So as we move forward, next week we're going to talk about creating clarity in the house, creating clarity as parents. Now, again, if you don't have children, this is a great podcast for you to listen to next week because this will help you clarify some direction for your family eventually, and I think it'll be a big boost to you. Thank you so much for joining us on The Person That Everyone Needs as we discuss parenting the person everyone needs.